Hello, everybody. Welcome to our information session for the Forest Stories Residency. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our information session for the Forest Stories Okay, solved. Welcome again. We are pleased to have you as well as our speakers tonight, Dr. Natash Fijn, Rory King, Ruby Kammoora, and Clancy Walker. For those of you who don't know, I am Caitlin. I am the production officer at PhotoAccess. We are the centres. We are the Regions Centre for Contemporary Photography, Film, Video and Media Arts. We are a not-for-profit and we do appreciate your donations. We are at the Manuka Arts Centre next to the Manuka Oval. So please do come in. I'm currently in the gallery. We have a lovely show up from B-Dam Pictures. And in fact, the entire suite of shows on at the moment are very relevant to the themes we will be talking about tonight. I would also like to, of course, acknowledge that we are on unceded lands. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. And we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. And we are very excited to launch the very first Forest Stories residency for 2022. So this residency has come out of the success of a series of workshops called Forest Stories. And it's a partnership between PhotoAccess and Plumwood Mountain, who are an independent conservation organisation. So the Forest Stories workshops took participants up to the mountain to explore ideas of visual ecological narratives. And that's what the residency aims to support and evolve. So Plumwood Mountain is a little group who are dedicated to protecting the diverse ecology and to carry on the legacy and philosophy of Val Plumwood. So Val is an internationally recognised scholar, and I believe Natasha will be talking more in depth about Plumwood's philosophy and work on the mountain. So in, I think it was 1975, she moved onto the mountain into an octagonal stone cottage. And this is in fact where your residency will be taking place. And we'll talk about that a bit more later. So Val Plumwood's philosophy was quite important for its ecofeminist and ecosophy work. She critiqued what she called the standpoint of mastery, which is a set of views of the self and its relationship to others associated with sexism, racism, capitalism, colonialism, and the domination of nature. So I will first hand over to Dr. Natash Fijn, and I'll just introduce her first. Hello, Natasha.
Hello.
Being here. So Natasha is a filmmaker, photographer, and ethnographic researcher. She leads the Forest Stories workshops through PhotoAccess, and she is one of Plumwood Mountain's stewards. She brings her intimate knowledge of the area's history and ecology, as well as extensive experience capturing its qualities through still and moving imagery. So, Natasha, I'll just hand it over to you and bring up some of your beautiful slides.
So thanks so much, Caitlin. So Val Plumwood was an eco-philosopher or environmental philosopher, but also a forest activist. And she lived in the midst of temperate Plumwood or Eucalyptus species forest on top of an escarpment at Plumwood Mountain, which is near where I live in the town of Braidwood at the edge of the Southern Tablelands. I knew her through Ecological Humanities breakfasts and discussions at the ANU while I was writing up my doctorate from 2004 until she died. Val died on her land up at Plumwood in February 2008. Just a second.
Is that a
Sorry about that. It's just like grinding in the background. But so Val died on her land at Plumwood in February 2008, and I've been part of Plumwood as an organisation since we formed as a committed group in 2011. As a committee, we're striving to conserve the house, gardens, and surrounding forest, and are acting as stewards for the land. So basically, we're looking after both the biological and cultural heritage. So the heritage of the house and the gardens, although fire swept through there, and I'll go into that later. But also a managed conservation area of 82 hectares, combined with a wilderness area of 36 hectares, and it's adjoining with Budawang and Monga National Parks. So there's no sort of strict boundary line, but we abut against those national parks. And I was just going to go through, we've got, so Val Plumwood, with a voluntary conservation agreement, she drew up these reasons and purposes for why she thought this land and the house and gardens and things should be conserved as part of this voluntary conservation agreement. And these are reasons that we abide by as stewards for the land as a committee. So I'll just go through those. So number one, in recognition of the earth as a self-healing organism and with the intention to facilitate this healing process in as non-interventionist way as possible. Two, in recognition that the native non-human life of the land has as much claim to it as human owners. And three, in accordance with the principle that in our role as stewards of this land, it is imperative that we respect the significance it holds for Aboriginal people. Four, to provide an example to encourage other private landholders in conservation initiatives on a wider scale. And five, to support biodiversity and acknowledge that people are dependent on and cannot survive without healthy ecosystems. And so that she wrote that in 2002, so she was quite forward thinking with, and I think it was one of the first voluntary conservation agreements in New South Wales. So while still young in her fight to save the forest, she had increasingly become saddened and despondent about her inability to actively halt the destruction of the forest she loved. And I'm quoting from Val here, "I needed to live in the forest and to try, in the tranquility of my own forest land, to keep a piece of the enchanted forest alive. In a sense, I was bound to do it. Environmental philosophy, my chosen area of inquiry, suggests that ideals can only be judged properly if one also confronts fully the perplexities of trying to live them out." So in essence, she had these philosophies about things, but she felt like that you needed to live them in a practical and embedded kind of manner. And that's why she wanted to live in the bush and preserve the forest where she lived. So she goes on to say, although forests still fall, the joy of living in the forest world helps to balance out the sadness generated by trying to defend them. And because she was quite a strong activist. So with her then husband, philosopher Richard Rutley, and friends, including the well-known writer Jackie French, Val built a house out of stone from the surrounding land and a garden in a clearing in the bush. And so I quote Val again, "The forest surrounded me, seized my sense of self and held it hostage. Almost every word I write now has the thought of the forest behind it as the ultimate progenitor and meaning of my speech." She was aware of the importance of the land for Indigenous people and felt that the wealth of cultural knowledge of a place was important to hand down from one generation to the next through her academic writing and mentorship. And so this is part of what we're trying to do, is to continue this legacy through residencies and through workshops or educational kind of aspects. So she wrote, "Through long attentive engagement with a place, we can discern how its myriad unfolding histories weave a web of subtle connection." And so I participate and observe up at Plumwood Mountain as a member of Plumwood's organisational committee. I go up there to replenish my need to be in the bush with the possibility of encountering more than human beings, but I'm also often engaging with Plumwood in a social sense, including the humans connected with Plumwood. So people are connected with Val Plumwood as a person, but there's the mountain as a place, and also there's the trees, and this is a plumwood tree, so they often grow up through ferns, and some would think of them as in a parasitic kind of relationship, but Val thought of it as a kind of commensal relationship where both, or mutual relationship where both sort of benefited from each other. So as a committed group of people who have connected with Val's philosophies in one way or another, we participate in working bees to facilitate the human-related aspects of the landscape up there. So we've done things like including solar panels and renovated a slab hut that Ruby and Clancy are currently living in, and trying to just maintain the place. So Val identified with plumwood trees as individuals, and I quote Val again, "Each a distinctively shaped sculpture, quite different even from trees in close proximity which face similar life conditions. This one twines curvaceous animal-like limbs around a tree fern, while its neighbour has a wrinkled, knobbly animal face like a possum." And so Val also lived with two wombats, Ruby and Victor, that became company for her, and she wrote about her special connection with wombats in detail. So for me, it is a privilege to encounter a wombat minding its own business as it makes a use of the same bush track that I'm walking along, or to see a lyrebird or wallaby around the same place on multiple occasions. So this is an image after fires swept it through up there. And so after worrying about the threat of the steadily encroaching Currong fire since late November, in the first days of January 2020, fire swept up through the escarpment and through the property. Although fire was predicted to come from the west, fire ripped up the Clyde Mountain on the eastern side and decimated the forest at the top of the escarpment. Amazingly, the house and wooden slab hut were intact, although a nearby shed was left a tangled and mutilated wreck, and that's now been sort of removed. Val had planted different species of waratah in combination with introduced species in the clearing, prioritising large flowering plants such as rhododendrons and camellias to attract bird species, but also as prevention against fire. The dense vegetation and burst water tank may have been what saved the house and slab hut, but much of the garden was burnt. So in 2005 article, Val wrote, "I have a mixed garden of local native and exotic plants that mediate the space around my dwelling, a stone house I built myself from local stone with fire survival in mind. Gardens provide much more than appearance, visual beauty, vegetables and flowers. Appropriate deciduous trees mediate climate, providing summer shade, winter sun, and above all in this context, some fire protection for the house." So she definitely had fire in mind, and so what has been a feature of the place in the recent sort of since January 2020 has been this recovery and regeneration after the fires. So the fire swept through Plumwood Mountain with different intensities, often licking up the bark on the trunks of large brown barrels, but passing over the smooth bark of plumwood trees. Tree ferns burnt, but often started sprouting new shoots out of their tops quite quickly after the fire, while local waratahs and banksias were burnt, but have started sprouting again from their base. After the fires, the trunks of the eucalypts were covered in epicorms in all different colours, showing very visible signs of stress. And so I was really relieved that the precious plumwood grove, which is one of the main things that is beautiful about the place and that we wanted to conserve, and that didn't burn. And that was more important sort of than really the house and the slab hut, because it would take thousands of years to replace these Gondwanan era ancient trees in the plumwood grove, and they were, the heart of what we were conserving. So post-fires, we've had 2 teams of ecologists surveying up at Plumwood. Team Quoll from the University of Wollongong have been coming up to survey Plumwood, but also in adjacent Moonga National Park. So they've found large numbers of greater gliders on the driveway. And there have been recent genetic studies that found that what previously thought was one species with different colours are actually 3 separate species. So these gliders are even rarer than was previously thought. And Plumwood looks to be providing a significant refuge for the greater gliders after the fires. And so maybe Caitlin, go on with the other images. So recently I've had my own project in relation to Plumwood and PhotoAccess, and I just exhibited recently some images from my grandfather from the end of the Second World War during the liberation of Maastricht in Holland. And so there's some images here that my grandfather took at that time in black and white. And then I juxtaposed those with some images after the fires of the regeneration that was occurring. And so I felt like that the two, so for me, it was a connection with my grandfather, and the two kind of places resonated across generations. So there was sort of hope and despair at this time with the destroyed bridges and destroyed buildings in Maastricht. And then there was also hope, but a sort of despair about climate change in relation to Plumwood Mountain. And so, as you can see, there's the mangled kind of shed after the fires. And but then there was hope with new ferns and things sprouting through. And so I'll just leave it to that. I've probably spoken for too long, but yeah, so we're all about encouraging sort of both the conservation side of things, but also an artistic kind of side of things where projects kind of speak of the importance of place and our connection to the surrounding environment.
Thank you, Natasha. That was great. Yes, I will now move on to Rory King. Let's bring you in. Hey, Rory.
Hello.
So Rory was a participant in one of the Forest Stories workshop last year.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I believe you went and spent some time up there taking some more work of your own. And we have some of your beautiful images here for you to speak about your experience and what you made. So go ahead, Rory.
Cool. All right. Hello, everyone. I am talking to you from Mirrawong country up in WA in the East Kimberley, which is pretty far from Plumwood. But I've been on a big road trip, sort of moving my way around Australia and taking pictures and sort of just exploring different parts of Australia. And I've spent a lot of time in the East Coast, so I thought I'd move around. So I'm up here. It's very hot and very muggy, which sounds like it's quite different from the weather in Canberra at the moment. I just want to talk quite casually about my experience at Plumwood and some of the work I was doing there and the different streams and avenues that I pursued to build a body of work specifically about Plumwood. So last year I participated in the Forest Stories workshop that was led by Tash, and I went up to Plumwood, and I didn't know anything about Val. I didn't know anything about Plumwood. I just have a good love for a healthy forest and had heard about Forest Stories and decided to go and check it out and see what this place was about. And when I got there, I sort of really fell in love with this incredible country. It's the most, if you have the opportunity to go, or if you're fortunate enough to be accepted for the residency, you'll notice as you turn off the highway there's this really quite dry eucalypt forest. It's quite scrubby and reminiscent of what you might think a traditional Australian bush looks like. And as you make your way up the path to where the cottage lies, the vegetation just almost instantly changes, and it becomes this enchanting temperate rainforest with these overwhelmingly large tree ferns and plumwood trees, and you hear bird calls and see lyrebird scratchings, and it just really sort of captures your imagination, and you just feel this sense of reverence in this place. So, you know, as a photographer, I was visually really interested in this area, and sort of started taking pictures until we got up to Val's cottage. And I didn't know much about Val at all, so I started doing a bit of research into her work before we left on Forest Stories. And one of the sort of really defining moments of her, I suppose, life, but a real turning point in her philosophy and in her writing was a crocodile attack that she was the victim of. She was canoeing up in Kakadu National Park before it was the national park, doing some trail assessment, just to sort of assess these trails, and was asked by a ranger to go out and spend some time there in the landscape and canoeing and this sort of thing. And she was canoeing down East Alligator River, which is a large body of water that now separates Kakadu National Park and Arnhem Land. And she was attacked by this saltwater crocodile that grabbed onto her leg and death rolled her numerous times. And fortunately, she was able to escape, not without injury, and had to crawl through the swamp and eventually get helivac to Darwin, and was in hospital doing rehabilitation for a long time. But this event, not only traumatic for her, but this event sort of really catapulted her work into speaking more about our relationship to predators. I'm just noticing these images pop up, and this is an interesting one I want to talk about. So I'll wrap up the crocodile story. Anyway, I learned about this crocodile story and was really fascinated by this, and thought it would be an amazing sort of point of departure to explore her life in relationship to this event, and her work in relationship to Plumwood, the place, and see if I could take photos that somehow responded to what she was writing about in her philosophy. So I was fortunate enough to be contacted by a publisher down in Melbourne who asked if I had any work that I wanted to publish, and I mentioned that I was doing this Forest Stories workshop, and that I was really engaged with this place, and there was an opportunity for me to go back to do a writer's retreat. So I sort of had to spin it a little bit, because I knew I wanted to mainly focus on photography, but I also write a lot of poetry and a lot of prose and that sort of thing. So I applied for this writer's residency, which is essentially the writer's version of what PhotoAccess is now offering with this residency. And I was accepted into that. So I went and stayed for 10 days in Val's cottage. And this image here on the left-hand side is essentially how it was set up. So I had this little bed here. Probably, I think I got up to 6 or 7 blankets. This was in the middle of July, or towards the end of July. So it got very, very, very cold, and I loved every second of it. There was a wood fire stove here just off to the right. And I brought my banjo, and there's an endless supply of Val's books to read. And I just really sort of nestled myself into this space and became really familiar with, this cottage as best as I could in these 10 days. But this is a really interesting, I think it's interesting, thing that popped up for me as I was doing this project. So this photo on the right-hand side of these two people, I found on some website deep in the internet. I tried to find it again so I could reference it in this talk, but I couldn't find it. It was like outdated early 2000s sort of Comic Sans font, and it was talking about this report of a group of I guess activists who were meeting to talk about conservation and this sort of thing. And you can see here on the left-hand side of the colored image, there's this rug, this sun rug with blues. It's sort of blue with yellow stars. And if you look carefully on my photo that I've taken where the bed is, there's the exact same rug in pretty much the exact same spot. This photo was taken in the early 2000s of these two people. And here I was in 2021 doing this residency with the exact same rug that I've had my entire life. It was the first thing that my parents bought when they got married, and I've kept it my entire life. And I even have a tattoo of the sun from the rug that was in this Val photo as well from the meetup. So that was a just incredible synchronicity for me. That is probably just a wild coincidence, but it was a real, I don't know, push sort of almost from something above, like a higher power, just being like, follow this work, keep pursuing this. And so I decided then that I wanted to go to Kakadu and photograph at Kakadu National Park where Val was attacked, and see if I could not only photograph the landscape there, but see if I could take some pictures of crocodiles and really flesh out this body of work. So I think maybe Caitlin on the next slide, yeah, the next couple of slides have some Kakadu photos. So these were pictures. I spent 10 days up in Kakadu, just wandering around, getting incredibly dirty, barefoot, running around with my camera, just having the best time, really connecting with this place and learning a lot more about the indigenous history of Kakadu, but also this grander network of philosophy, this really complex idea that involves non-humans, humans, spirituality, mythology, storytelling, just everything encompassed in these really beautiful sort of cultural packages that Indigenous people have, carried with them for 60, 70,000 years. And I really wanted to try and weave that into my work as well, to find these parallels between what Val was talking about, which is essentially Indigenous philosophy, and see where I could come into that with photography and explore both of those things. So, I was photographing crocodiles. Fire management there is huge. If you've spent any time in the Northern Territory or WA, you'll know that fire management is an incredibly important part of the landscape up there. And so I was taking pictures of fires and how that has, implications in conserving ecology. It might seem detrimental to burn the landscape, but it's actually a really vital tool to promote growth. And you sort of go out and have these really low intensity grass fires that burn all the grass, that then mean when the sun's shining, these areas that are blackened get hotter than if there was a dense grass coverage, and that promotes, more growth, and there's just more vibrancy, and also it sort of burns the sort of scrub underneath to prevent a buildup, which could result in a larger intensity fire and cause more destruction. So I was really fascinated by that. And I was really fortunate when I was up there that was in full swing. So I spent a lot of time photographing fires, and I came back to Canberra, and all this work I'd done was edited and condensed down and packaged up into a book that is being published very soon. I actually sent off the final email to get all the final copies done. So that's a really exciting milestone. Just here, these photos are some pictures of Val's artifacts, I guess, possessions that are now in the care of the National Museum. So that up here is Fight for the Forests, the book that she co-wrote with her husband Richard, and a pair of her boots. And I found this really interesting juxtaposition between living at Plumwood, where it's kind of just like Val's stuff is everywhere and it's conserved, but you can go through it. And then going to the museum, and it's so, you have to wear gloves and they pull it out of boxes and it's all very, white and pristine. And I try and explore that a little bit within the book as well, that juxtaposition between the human or the culture and the nature. And even within the environments in which Val's stuff is stored now, there was that duality. So it's all in a book. It's all getting sent off at the printers. If you are interested in seeing, I'll do a bit of a shameless plug. If you're interested in seeing the entirety of the work that I've done at Plumwood, about Plumwood, then I am having a book launch at PhotoAccess probably mid-November. I'm aiming for the second week of November. It's not November, sorry, August. It's hot up here. It's exhausting. And so please do come along. There will be things on PhotoAccess social media, and if you follow me on social media, I'll promote that as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Some beautiful images. I've also shared the your website to the Plumwood pictures on there, as we had some questions about where we could find them. And yes, we will definitely be sending out lots of ads for your book launch, which we hope everyone come along to. It'll be a beautiful book. So thank you, Rory. We will now just quickly move on to Ruby and Clancy, who are with us from Plumwood Mountain. Hey, guys.
Hi.
You are inside the house, the octagonal house. Ruby and Clancy are caretakers currently on Plumwood Mountain, and they're going to give you a good idea of what you can expect for day-to-day life up there. So they've also got a couple of images to share of the space up there. And yes, thank you guys for chatting to us. Take it away.
Thanks, Caitlin. So my name's Ruby. I'm a geography student and one of the caretakers at Plumwood Mountain at the moment. And I just want to acknowledge that Plumwood Mountain is on unceded Yuin Walbunja land and waters. And we're very lucky to be here in a very long and unceded place. Maybe Clancy would like to do an intro.
Yeah, my name is Clancy, and I am the other half of the caretaking team at Plumwood. I'm a documentary filmmaker, lived and studied film in Melbourne, and then moved here maybe a year and a half ago or so.
Yeah, so we moved here kind of ended 2020 after the fires had come through, and so a big part of our role has been kind of rebuilding, helping rebuild the amenities and get the garden and the house kind of back into a habitable condition.
Yeah.
But it's been amazing being here. So Plumwood Mountain is right on top of the eastern escarpment, overlooking Bateman's Bay to the east, right next to Clyde Mountain off the King's Highway. And it's a really remote, really forested area that's full of incredible animals. We've got wombats, lyrebirds, bowerbirds, funnel web spiders, a multitude of really amazing animals and plants and different forest communities. And it's a really interesting place to kind of be and experience what a more than human community kind of feels like. You kind of get woken up by the lyrebirds' calls, which is a beautiful thing. So there's lots of like walking and forest exploration to be done. And yeah, I would love to show you some beautiful walks down to the creek where there's yabbies, and the beautiful Plumwood Grove, which is potentially thousands and thousands of years old, and is kind of, Gondwana and refuge, which is really gorgeous.
Yeah, so to talk about the place that you'll be living, the successful applicant will be living, is Val's stone cottage, which Rory described before. His bed is actually right next to me here. We have actually upgraded the bed. So there's a double bed in the stone cottage now. So you'll be slightly more comfortable, hopefully a little less cold. And most of what we've been doing since we moved here, since the fires, is rebuilding the amenities. So overseeing things like putting the solar panels on, so there's limited power in the house, enough to power sort of digital camera batteries, a laptop, not much more than that. You shouldn't be bringing a hairdryer or a toaster or anything like that. Also, we've overseen water tanks going in, so there's cold running water into the house, which has gas cooking as well. And there is an outdoor shower. And what else is there, amenities wise?
There's a beautiful fireplace and an outdoor fireplace and lots of wood to keep you warm. But you can imagine kind of being around a fire, being in the bush, being in the dark after a certain point in time. You know, it's quite a rudimentary bush experience, but it is within the forest. So it's a welcome kind of alternative to city life, silence, and the sound of animals instead of traffic.
Yeah. And so we have a hut about 50 meters from Val's cottage where you would be living. And apart from the kind of our day-to-day activities, which would be caretaking, doing everything you would expect a caretaker to do, weeding, mending things, brush cutting. We also work in the house on our own creative projects. So it will be a shared working space at times.
Yeah, unfortunately, the main source of power and light is the main house, but it's ample and we will negotiate privacy in a way that works best for everybody. We're also here to help, so we'll be able to show you how to use some of the off-grid systems that we have. We can show you how to chop wood if you don't know already, and some other fun things as well. So Plumwood Mountain itself is maybe about 15 minutes out of Braidwood, which is a really interesting town to explore and quite a creative alternative community that lives in the surrounding areas. So a nice place to kind of be involved in as well as the mountain. And yeah, we're just off the King's Highway, about 3 kilometers up a very rough four-wheel drive kind of track that, as Rory explained, kind of moves through dry sclerophyll through into temperate rainforest. So if you don't have a four-wheel drive, that's okay. We've got a very rough bush basher Suzuki, which used to belong to Val, which is still running up and down the drive, which you can use for your stay here, and a place to park off the highway down the bottom. It's also a beautiful track to walk. You might see some gangs or this beautiful golden whistler on the screen. It's a really nice kind of clear way to experience the forest. If you're not an experienced bushwalker, we would suggest that, it's a rural, remote environment. So you've got to be comfortable being in the bush, potentially by yourself at times, although we'll be here most of the time. But just to have that kind of awareness and savviness that, you're reliant and independent, as well as, we're here to help. But as long as you feel comfortable being in nature, quite away from other humans.
Yeah, I would say an adventurous spirit is definitely an important thing to have, but also being aware of your surroundings, because a lot of these photos that are coming up on screen were taken in the bush, so kind of like a brief wander from the driveway most of the time, but it is very easy to get disorientated if you're chasing a lyrebird. So you want to kind of have a sense of direction or a compass or an app or just an understanding of the bush before you go and chase the lyrebird off a cliff.
But we're really looking forward to hosting whoever is a successful PhotoAccess applicant. And Clancy is an amazing filmmaker. I like to take photos sometimes when I'm not very good at it. So
Absolutely
we're here
not
to
true.
talk about, you know, your creative project as much as share insights about the practicalities of living here, and also maybe some curious insights into the things we've found while living here, such as an amazing photo of Val Plumwood with Pauline Hanson from the the 90s. There's a few little treats here that I'm sure you'll get to discover whether you're in the forest or in the library. Yeah, there's multiple avenues to get lost in and enjoy yourself. So
Yeah.
maybe we'll hand back to you, Caitlin, unless there's anything you want to say.
No, I think there's definitely a lot of Easter eggs in the garden that you can take photos of.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. You paint quite a lovely picture, literally as well, with these beautiful pictures. So I'll just bring everyone back in. Hello. So we've got a few people with us, and I just want to let you know that you absolutely can post a comment or a question if you'd like to ask any of our guests anything in particular. But I'll just quickly go over some of the logistics of what the residency will actually include. So part of that will be membership with PhotoAccess for 12 months. The residency itself is a 3-month period, and that will include unlimited and extended access to our facilities, including the film developing lab, darkroom, library, and our digital suite. You will also be receiving support and mentorship from PhotoAccess staff, as well as Plumwood Mountain artists and stewards that you see here. The time on Plumwood Mountain will be for 10 days, but I think we are flexible with how those 10 days are spent, whether they're all at once or if they're broken up over a period of time. That will kind of depend on the applicant availability, as well as Ruby and Clancy. The work that is made will be featured in an online gallery as a visual essay produced during the residency, and we'll also be doing, extensive social media support for you as well. So I think those kind of cover the main points. What would you all like the applicant to know? Who would be your ideal person to apply?
Well, I guess the thing is, as Ruby and Clancy pointed out, it is important to have some bush experience because, we don't want you getting lost or anything up there. But yeah, and coming with an open kind of creative outlook. And one aspect that would be good is, like there's the principles of woofing or sort of staying on organic farms and things like that. We're sort of taking it with that principle a little bit. So it would be, we do expect sort of some practical kind of support for Ruby and Clancy as well, like with the chopping of the wood, or like being engaged. And as an anthropologist, we call it participant observation. So to get the most out of the experience, it would be good to actually participate and sort of think, how can I contribute to this place as a place that can be conserved, so if you wanted to do a little bit of weeding or, like just some sort of contribution. And I mean, the artistic output at the end is also a form of contribution, and that's the main kind of output we as an organization want to get from it, is these connections with artists and creatives. But we also have a brew residency program, which is bush retreats for environmental writers. And in that program, that focuses on environmental writing. But there is the potential to kind of, think not just in terms of photo media, but writing as well. So, but this is a specific kind of PhotoAccess Plumwood residency that's sort of separate from the Brew program, but there is the potential to kind of coordinate and collaborate. I mean, this will be our first year, so it's not like everything's set in stone about how things will operate. But yeah, maybe Ruby and Clancy could add to that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Tash. That, you know, openness to living the practical and the theoretical, and I think that's embodied in the place itself. And that, you know, you can go out and make a fire bath, but in order to do that, you've got to experience the chopping of the wood, the freezing cold on your fingers, as much as the beautiful experience of watching Bateman's Bay light up with the stars. It's a multi-sensory and kind of non-dualistic experience of living up here. So I think, yeah, as much as you want to contribute to weeding the garden, I'm sure Val would love that, as her garden seems quite meticulous. But however you want to engage, we're open to facilitating that as best as possible.
So yeah, on the Brew network, I think that's a really exciting opportunity for some cross collaboration, and I think in years to come it would be really nice to see this evolve into an outcome of a published work that we can support and fund to make happen, very much in the way that Rory's managed to make this happen for himself. But yeah, hopefully we can continue evolving this into something documentary and archival, and continue the legacy. So I will also just mention to those still with us that we are recording this and it will be posted up for anyone else interested in applying. So please let everybody know that it's available. When did we close applications? Will be at the end of July. So we've still got a few weeks. Is there any other comments?
For the period of time for the residency, we were thinking September, October, November, because like Rory was there in the middle of the depths of winter, and it can get quite cold, as probably Ruby and Clancy are experiencing now. So we've sort of selected the time so that it's a bit milder, and autumn's, no, it'll be spring, sorry. Yeah, spring's nice with the like flowers blooming, and then, you know, you're not going to get the heat of the summer. So I think it's a good timing to be up there at Plumwood too.
Okay. Do we have any questions? There are no questions coming in. If we don't have any questions, maybe we will wrap it up unless anyone else has anything to say. All right. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. As I said, we'll post this up. We'll keep trying to attract people to apply. We're very excited about this. I think it's going to be a really good opportunity to make something beautiful. Thank you, Dallas. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Kate. Okay.
Thank you, Kate.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks, Rory. Thanks, Natasha.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Ruby.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good time, Rory, on your travels.
Thank you. Wish me luck.
Yeah.
Luck.